Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you all for coming. I'm in the Oceans Department here at Stanford. I'm based at the Hopkins Mining Station in Monterey Bay. And today, I want to talk with you about what is truly the final frontier here on Earth, our oceans. It's the largest ecosystem on Earth, 70% of our planet. The Pacific Ocean alone is 1/3 of our planet, and we have explored roughly 5%, slightly more than visible space. So it's truly the last frontier for discovery, for exploration, and in fact for the future of our planet and all of us. The oceans is central to life on this planet. It's life support system. It absorbs between 1/4 and 1/3 of carbon and captures it and stores it at depth for periods of hundreds to thousands of years. So it might provide real important solutions to climate change, climate mitigation. It produces about half of the primary production that feed food webs on our planet, food, livelihoods, and supports a great diversity of life, most of which is still yet to be explored. And then at the same time, sort of matching this dearth, the scarcity of knowledge, the claim on space and resources of oceans is increasing exponentially. This is a trend that's been called the blue acceleration, where starting in 2000, the extent and intensity of food production through aquaculture, water production through desalination, so forth and so on, has basically really skyrocketed. And then what has also escalated is the impacts of climate change. And for over a year, every single day, we have had record ocean temperatures in our data record. Over a year. The warmest oceans on record. And developing solutions to these problems is difficult in oceans because it's objectively really hard to understand what lives in the ocean, how it functions, how oceans are used, just out of the sheer vastity and remoteness and logistical challenges of research at sea. So, as the title of my talk hints, what we are witnessing, it's really kind of a beam of hope in harnessing the potential of the technology and data revolution for oceans. And there's been a real explosion of technologies such as sensors to detect, to track ocean conditions, tags on animals, biologging, autonomous vehicle, gliders, satellite, and also development from citizen and science and social media that has provided an incredible flood of data, unprecedented flood of data, what's been called the data tsunami. So it's estimated that in the last 20 years, there's more information has been gathered on ocean system than in the previous 100 years. So these streams of data, combined with advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence, transform this data and information that then in turn can inform users and decisions by community and leaders worldwide. So I'm going to go into some examples of what this potential is and what are some of the most potentially useful and exciting sources of data. A prime example comes from vessel tracking system. The large vessels, larger than 15 meters, are mandated to carry transponders that signals the position and identity of vessels every few minutes. This is an anti-collision device. This is for safety measure, but it has created what is called found data, data that are produced for one purpose but can be used for another. And in particular, this has provided an unprecedented picture of how we use the ocean across our world ocean. The data from automatic information system that essentially tells us where vessels are, combined with machine learning, can illuminate different kind of ocean uses, can separate, for example, deep sea mining from fishing, and even different kinds of fishing. Because vessels, when they have different gears, have different behaviors. They go on straight lines or they meander. And so we can then categorize these millions and millions of data points to provide for the first time a picture of what is our footprint on the ocean. So for example, this is the global estimated fishing effort for 1 year. And this data are now through this organization, Global Fishing Watch, available for diverse uses. So I'm going then to go into 3 additional examples from our work at Stanford and with Center for Ocean Solutions that illustrate different applications of these new data streams and platforms to detect climate refugia, areas, ecosystems, places that are particularly resilient in the face of climate change. Also to illuminate marine biodiversity. It's estimated that over 80% of the species that live in the oceans are still undescribed. I can go later into how these extrapolations are made, but we still have to discover most of what lives in the ocean. And then blue foods and the potential of food from the sea to contribute, maybe not as a silver bullet, but as an important contributor to tackling malnutrition globally. So just as we can track vessels from space, we can also see marine ecosystems. Marine ecosystems like coral reefs and vegetated habitats in shallow, clear water can be seen from space. And this is a new ability that we now have to track the extent and change in these really important systems that are hotspot of biodiversity and provide numerous services, from coastal protection to carbon sequestration to sustaining ocean economies. One of these systems are marine forests. So this is a kelp forest here off the Mexican coast, here in the California coast. Marine forests are made up of very large algae. This algae, this is the giant kelp that we have here in our regions, reach all the way to the surface. They grow. They have this tremendous ability to capture nutrients in this cold, productive water and grow at an incredibly fast rate, 1 to 2 feet per day. So it's a hotspot of productivity in the oceans and mitigate the impacts of currents of coastal areas. They provide recreational opportunities, so it's a really important system worldwide. They're distributed in these thin strips along the coast because they need light and they can't occur in deep waters. So they have a depth limit of about 30 to 50 meters. But when you add up all of the extent of their global distribution, it's equivalent to the Amazon forest. So in terms of carbon sequestration, for example, they have tremendous potential. Because these algae are very large and they come all the way up to the surface, that's a drone image, they can be seen from space. And so now, with this ability, imagery from Landsat, from satellite, has been transformed in global maps of the distribution of marine forests worldwide for the past 40 years. This is the first ability that we have to track change in this system, as well as others I mentioned, at scale in real time. I mentioned climate refugia. How do we use this information, for example, to detect the resilient area? These data sets, for example, here for our coast, from the coast of California and Mexico and Canada, there's 40 years of measurements that are done through time, every few months. We can use this data to develop metrics of persistence of forests at the scale of 1 kilometer pixel. Essentially, for each little area of the ocean, these grids, we can determine where kelp has been present for a majority of that time. And this includes areas that are resistant to climate change. When there is a heat wave, kelp persists, or that they come back really quickly. So this information is very useful because then it can be leveraged for protection and restoration of these systems to determine where investments in environmental conservation and restoration might be most effective, and where instead those investments might be obliterated by the impacts of climate change. And these are used by coastal communities. One of the challenges, as I mentioned, is the sheer vastness of the oceans and our ability to explore and discover marine biodiversity in this remote and in somewhat inhospitable habitats and at scale. The revolution in this, the potential for revolution in this sense is provided by environmental DNA. The genetic material that organisms shed in their surrounding water as they move through them. So now, through studies, for example, that we conducted here in Monterey Bay, we have already shown that it's possible to detect many more species in just 1 liter of water than with traditional methods that use nets or visual sensors. So this is opening a new door to use methodology that can be applied at vast scales to attract biodiversity. Despite these advances, these methods are still costly and relatively slow, and there's some really exciting work that has been conducted by the Jennifer Dion's lab here in Material Science and Engineering. Jennifer was actually a previous speaker here in the laser series that employs nanophotonics, light, to develop small sensors that are 1 centimeter square silicon chips that have hundreds of thousands of little receptors that bind with molecules like DNA, genetic materials, or other molecules like toxins or pathogens, and that binding changes the color of light that is emitted. Then these patterns can be translated in the presence and diversity of different species. So with this potential, if this can be applied at scale, there's a potential to revolutionize our ability to discover diversity, but also track change over vast areas. And for example, both in Palau, in the Western Pacific, and here in Monterey Bay, we have been collaborating with governments and environmental managers and local scientists to apply these techniques to tracking diversity over these vast protected areas that exceed, for example, the size of the state of California, and so are very difficult to monitor otherwise. So this opens new windows in our ability to track ocean health and assess diversity at scale. And then the last example that I want to present illustrates the importance of making what data are available already more accessible, useful, and usable. For example, in the fight against food insecurity and malnutrition that affects hundreds of millions of people worldwide. Oceans produce a variety of different foods, seaweeds, shellfish, fish. There's over 3,000 different kinds of species that are consumed, and many of these species are superfoods, have concentrations of really important nutrients that include omega-3s, calcium, vitamins, that is comparable or in some cases much higher than some of the terrestrial meats and other food that we consume. To make information about the nutritional value and the potential of harnessing blue foods, food from the ocean, to tackle malnutrition, as part of an initiative that's called the Blue Food Assessment, that was led by centers at Stanford as well as collaborators all over the world. One of the projects has entailed assembling data on nutritional profiles of over 3,500 different species in a database that is openly accessible. And this information, combined with other data sets and models on the environmental footprint of different aquatic food production systems from aquaculture and fisheries, as well as the vulnerability of these systems to climate change, has been assembled in a platform that enables decision makers to include blue foods in their dietary guidelines and national policies, for example. So these are examples of increasing the access for decision making. So for the first time, there is an unprecedented opportunity to harness the data revolution for ocean health and people health. And this will require innovation and investment in three broad areas. One is to increase our ability to collect the data in real time and at scale in oceans. This involves advances in sensor technologies, for example, participatory approaches that leverage citizen science programs, combining satellite data with advances in artificial intelligence, for example. There's also the need and opportunity to bring these new analytical capabilities from machine learning, for example, to transform stream of data and information, and then finally to link this information to those that need it most and they need to make decisions to support effective decision making and the application of this information. So with that, thank you very much.